This lecture introduces the Hohokam, the prehistoric inhabitants of the Sonoran Desert in the areas surrounding the modern cities of Phoenix and Tucson, shown in this map in the peach color. Remember the Paleo-Indian, Archaic, Formative, Classic periods mentioned in the Time and Space lecture? We've discussed Paleo-Indian big game hunters that colonized the Americas at the end of the last ice age 15,000 years ago. In this scheme, Archaic refers to foraging cultures, those that made a living hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants, and we discussed southwestern foragers and more complex hunter-gatherers of the Pacific coast. Now we're moving to the formative period, which is marked by the emergence or adoption of agriculture and settlement into permanent villages. The Hohokam are one of several formative period cultures that inhabited the American Southwest. Regional cultures emerged and developed differences in architectural forms, styles and forms of pottery, and methods used to bury their dead. The Hohokam built shallow pit houses early, shifting to above-ground adobe structures later. They made red-on-buff decorated pottery and cremated their dead. In contrast, the Puebloan cultures in the north, shown in orange on the map, built deep pit houses early, shifting to above-ground masonry structures later. They made black-on-white decorated pottery and buried their dead curled up in a fetal position. While we will only be covering the Hohokam, MCC offers ASB223 Southwest Archaeology, a class that covers the entire region in greater detail. Hohokam chronology is divided into two broad periods, the Pre-Classic and the Classic. The Pre-Classic period, which is subdivided into the Pioneer, Colonial, and Sedentary periods, is characterized by large pit-house villages centered on ball courts, the production of red-on-buff decorated pottery, and extensive exchange networks that tied communities in different areas together. The Classic period is marked by a shift to above-ground adobe architecture, contraction of these exchange networks, and the late introduction of polychrome decorated pottery, most likely resulting from an influx of Puebloan immigrants from the north. The Classic period in the Hohokam chronological sequence is different from the Classic period in the Paleo-Indian Archaic Formative Classic sequence. In that sequence, Classic refers to the emergence of city-states and complex social, political, and economic organization. We will be looking at examples from Mesoamerica and South America of these developments. The Classic period in the Hohokam chronological sequence refers to what was initially thought to be the highest period of development, but as we will see in the unit on the Hohokam collapse, the Classic period may not have been as great as it had previously been thought to be. The original definition of the Hohokam culture by archaeologists in the 1930s envisioned a migration of people from western Mexico, and the names of the pre-classic periods reflect this concept. The pioneer period saw the arrival of immigrants bringing irrigation technology and pioneering in the Salt Gila Basin around modern Phoenix. The colonial period saw these founding populations expand into and colonize adjacent areas along the rivers to the north into the Verde Valley, south to Tucson, east to Safford, and west to Gila Bend. The sedentary period then saw a contraction of Hohokam populations back into the core Salt Gila Basin. Since the 1970s, development in the Phoenix and Tucson areas, particularly the construction of highways, has triggered an explosion of research on the Hohokam culture. Discoveries in the Tucson area of irrigation systems dating as early as 2000 BC suggest that later and larger irrigation systems were not introduced by immigrants from West Mexico, but rather were developed by local populations that had adopted corn agriculture introduced from the south. Excavations over the past 25 years as the I-10 corridor through Tucson was widened, have provided abundant data about this early period. Modern understanding of the Hohokam has proposed a regional system with a core population that interacted with populations in peripheral areas. The Salt Gila Basin, the Phoenix, Casa Grande, Coolidge area, shown as hatched on the map, was the core area of the Hohokam, its political, economic, and cultural center, while surrounding areas, those within the dotted line on the map, including Tucson, the Tonto Basin, Safford, Gila Bend, and the Verde Valley, were peripheral and participated differently in the larger regional system, sometimes tightly integrated politically and economically with populations in the core, and at other times more loosely integrated with less political and economic interaction. Populations in these different areas were integrated through economic exchange and communal ritual. They traded agricultural goods, products from wild plants and animals, shell, stone, and other minerals, and crafted goods like pottery, baskets, and textiles. Communal ritual centered on ball courts in the pre-classic period and on platform mounds in the classic period brought communities together and provided a shared sense of identity. Historic exchange between indigenous groups of the area provide a model of prehistoric exchange patterns. The A'atum, or people, differentiated themselves broadly into two different groups: the Acamel A'atum, or river people, sometimes called the Pima Indians, and the Tohono A'atum, or desert people, sometimes called the Papago Indians. The Acamel A'atum had irrigated fields along the Gila River, while the Tohono A'atum had no irrigated fields. These two groups exchanged complementary products, agricultural goods, for wild plant foods, and specialized in the production of goods from different environmental zones. Similar patterns appear to have existed prehistorically. For example, the Phoenix area has lots of irrigable farmland, but little in the way of available wild foods or suitable materials for making stone tools. In contrast, surrounding upland areas had limited agricultural potential, but more abundant wild foods and suitable materials for making stone tools. These complementary differences created ideal contexts for exchange between populations in the different areas. Not only were goods traded, historically, the Tohono A'atum would also provide labor for harvesting the fields and the irrigation systems, and for the construction and maintenance of these irrigation systems. From this introduction, you should know about the two broad periods of the Hohokam chronology, the pre-classic and classic periods. The organization of populations in the Hohokam area into a regional system with a core in the Salt Gila Basin and surrounding peripheral areas. And you should also know the important role exchange had in integrating populations in different environmental zones. The next units cover interpreting Hohokam social organization using architecture, understanding Hohokam canals and irrigation agriculture, reconstructing patterns of pottery production and exchange, and the collapse of the Hohokam system. Be sure to read the article by David Abbott in the Readings module before viewing the pottery unit. However, before moving on to these next units, you should now watch the video Under These Fields 1,000 Years Ago about excavations at the GRU site near Coolidge, Arizona that were done before highway construction in the 1990s. A link to this video can be found in the Videos module.